In 2019, comedian Eric Lampert, lost his memory and then became convinced he had caused the COVID pandemic. Yes, that is true. I really did think that. He talks about his extraordinary journey back to health. There's a whole article written about me. 2 pages. 2 pages for me. Mad. And in this video, I'm going to not only go through this article, but I'm going to tell you why. Basically, I am tired of this story that I've been carrying. And as they say, change your story, change your life, right? The way you feel inside of yourself, what you believe, affects how you view and interact with the external, which means that you can change the world by looking within and tweaking your identity. And yeah, the reason I'm making this video is because I feel like I've now reached a point in my life where I am exhausted by this story that I'm carrying. And I am grateful for the experience. I mean, it was almost unbelievable. Maybe still kind of boggles my mind. You know, it was beautiful and it had terror and mythological anger and deep catonic sadness and beatitude and apotheoses, and it was a wild ride. It was like being on a roller coaster, and roller coasters are a good laugh, right? But if you're trapped on it and it keeps going round, and it keeps going round and round, and round and round and round and round for years and 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 years, and yeah, at some point you want to like get off, you know. Whoa, I'm a little dizzy. And maybe going on this roller coaster was a choice, or maybe it was forced on me. That's a whole other debate for another time. And honestly, I don't think I care to know anymore. It is what it is. You know? And now I find myself in a position where I have some say in the creation of my character. And the reason I say that I have some say is because there are also larger forces at play. There is the world within, you know, the billions of miles of DNA that have some say in how I behave. And, you know, like think about all the organs. They all work together and yet separately. And all of that happens without me having to go like, come on, heart, beat, beat, beat. You know, these happen. Like I blink without thinking that I need to blink, right? It's all on automation. And then there's the external forces, right? Like all the geopolitical drama that happens all around us. These detonations that have a butterfly effect in ways that I can't fully predict, and that can have an effect on my life. The weather, the extreme rises and falls of weather that are now catalysts for how my mood is affected, my productivity, and not just mine, but the world around me. So all of these different things have an effect, and bringing awareness to it means that you are more likely to be able to surf it with success. You might have some highs and some lows, right? Some successes and some losses, but ultimately bringing awareness to what's going on helps you to have some say in how you behave and interact with the world. So that's my continuing goal. For those of you that have followed my journey, you will know that in 2019 I had something happen to me which was cataclysmic. My personal nexus event, my black swan. You know, for me, there was a clear before and after, right? That day was like, you know, a sort of birth almost. Everything was suddenly new again. And I played the cards that I was dealt, or as Viktor Frankl will say, an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. Those 7 years after the event were supernatural. And in this video, I'm going to go through the article written by Paula Cocozza, a journalist for The Guardian, a lovely woman, brilliant writer. She wrote a book called How to Be Human. Oh, it's on my other bookshelf. Oh, I love that I can say that. It's on my other bookshelf. Nerd! Boop! And so, yeah, we're going to read the article. I've only read it once, so I'm intrigued to actually see what that's like, because it was quite strange having someone else prod into my head and sift through the shadowy membranes of repression and see what story lurks in my head. A lot of those details I actually share already. I either have shared already on YouTube, or it's in my show 0-1, which is the one-man show I'm taking to the Edinburgh Festival this year. But there's a difference between me going, here are all the messy and vulnerable bits that make the self, and having someone else look inside. So that's a strange feeling. So we'll go through the article, and then after that, I'll share some of the things that I learned along the way to help create a character, to help improve your life in little ways. And some of those lessons I learned because of the data that I've gorged on as I moved forward. Like, for example, there's a book, James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. That really helped, for example. But then I also learned things by reading, John Milton's Paradise Lost, which you wouldn't think is a self-help book. But there's a lovely line, for example, a mind can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven, which is essentially what I was saying about how the world inside of you affects your external. If inside you feel tormented and you feel burdened and stressed and in hell inside of here, then what you see will maybe act as a feedback loop and really make you feel like you are in a sort of hell. Anyway, my point is, I want to change my story because I want to change my life. I'm a little bit tired. Okay. All right. Follow me. Follow me! Come on, let's go! On the day his life changed, Eric Lampaert woke up and saw his hands. What amazed him was that they were moving in front of him, and he appeared to be the person in control of them. We're drinking coffee in the Groucho Club in London, and at this point he lets go of his cup and wriggles his fingers. Lampaert is an actor and stand-up whose work has a strong, clowning dimension. His hands always seem to have minds of their own. Yeah, believe me, that is more true than you could believe. Believe me, that is more true than you can believe. That's a terrible sentence, Eric. I know, shame on me. Shame! I'm going to whip myself later as a naughty punishment. Reed, shut up. Okay, you shut up. Okay. Where was I? Okay. But as he got out of bed that fateful morning, marvelling at the magical things on the ends of his arms, he felt only wonder. What he didn't yet know was that he had lost his memory, and his life would no longer feel like his own. That was 7 years ago, on the 17th of March 2019, Lampaert says. A date not so much stamped in his memory as retrieved from his journal and recommitted. It was a knock on the door that told him there are other things out there, beyond his bedroom, the Miracle Mile district of Los Angeles. Housemates in the home he'd once shared with his estranged wife, and the downstairs neighbour who had knocked to collect a bottle of bleach. Lampaert had borrowed the bleach to clean coffee stains from the sink, but now he didn't know the person at the front door, or the housemate wandering by. Eric? His neighbour said, and I went, I don't know. 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 This story of how Lampaert, 40... I'm 39, okay? Fake news? Much? I'm 39, okay? I'm 40 in 1 month and a half. Okay. The story of how Lampaert, 40, lost his memory, what he calls the event, and regained it 18 months later is the subject of his new show, 0-1, which opens at the Edinburgh Fringe next month. Set in a padded cell, it's a two-hander between patient and doctor, both played by Lampaert, with bit parts for other voices in his head. Lampaert as himself, lover, child, monster, and even as Hugh Grant. all pitching in to make some sense of the 7 years since that morning when his neighbour drove him to hospital, where he was diagnosed with confusion delirium and symptoms of amnesia. The severance that amnesia brought was so complete that Lampert didn't recognise his parents. "I get that you're this guy's mum," he told his mother, "but as far as I'm concerned, Eric died." Regaining his memory has often felt like bringing himself back to life. "I'm not afraid of dying anymore," he says. "I've already done it." It sounds a bit Frankensteinian. Ooh, Frankensteinian. Never heard it said like that. That's really nice. Frankensteinian. And writhing around as though some inner monster was searching for the exit is a recurring feature of his routines. But when his memories begin to return, he says, they felt like souvenirs from someone else's life. And he was remaking himself, a sort of visitor in his own body. "I'm always aware that I'm wearing Eric's skin," he says. Professionally, he had always been known as Eric Lampert, but when the amnesia struck, he deleted his website and stopped posting to his 100,000 Facebook followers. He adopted new social media identities, artist formerly known as Eric, Surfing Chaos, and made ends meet with occasional TV work and one-off gigs heavy on improv. The new show is an attempt to heal, to reunite himself with his name. "I want to shed this story. I need it out of me," he says. Lampert's amnesia happened in an instant, but it was a lifetime in the making. Raised all over the world, before settling in the UK in 2016, Lampert arrived in Los Angeles while riding a wave of success, as he puts it. In the previous 3 years, he had got married to content creator and model Jordan Duane, won a Royal Television Society Award and an International Comedy Award at Comédia in Quebec, and supported Eddie Izzard. He appeared in Luc Besson's Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets and thought it would translate to work in LA, he says, and it just did not at all. Before his amnesia, Lampert wanted to change his life. He'd often had anxiety, constant thoughts, classic anxiety. The narrator that just won't stop talking, he says. His marriage broke down, and in late 2018, he filed for divorce. It was a very lonely time. It was clear that I was repeating behaviours I'd had in previous relationships. What sort of behaviours? Well, I cheated because whenever there was an argument, I would feel abandoned, and I would take control of that. It was from abandonment issues that I had when I was a kid. When his marriage failed, he felt deep sadness, rejection, shame, but also an acknowledgement that if I am to fall in love again one day, I can't repeat those habits. When hypnotherapy ads popped up on the computer screen, they felt like a lifeline. And after a few sessions of an online course, he was visibly different. Friends thought he'd got taller, but he realised that he just stopped hunching. Like maybe everyone else, I didn't necessarily like so much about me, he says. But during hypnotherapy, I'd wake up happy and I'd go to bed grateful. It was almost frightening, he says, to feel happy every day, like Icarus flying too close to the sun. Alongside anxiety, Lampert has also intermittently experienced depression. In 2016, he blogged about how cognitive behavioral therapy helped him to manage suicidal thoughts. Hypnotherapy went deeper than CBT and offered a new way to understand his mental health. He learned the tools of going within, but he says, there was no one there to keep an eye on me. Just him and his laptop, borderless, careening around his past in this giddy, perceptive state. 3 specific memories altered him when he resurfaced. As a child, Lampert was always the outsider. His father was a British jockey, and by the age of 12, Lampert had lived in France, where his mother comes from, and where Lampert was born, Belgium, Germany, Italy, South Africa, and Dubai, before the family settled in the English horse racing town of Newmarket, Suffolk. At school in England, I used to get beaten up, Lampert says, for being French. He switches to an immaculate accent. I used to speak like this. I had a very strong accent. He perfected a southern English voice for protection. One could argue, is that why I became an actor? One day, he was beaten so badly, his dental braces cut his lips. Yeah, the braces like went inside. But anyway, that's not a problem. But he refuses to make a fuss about that or seem like a victim. Yeah! Fucking tired of it. It wasn't that brutal, he says. And besides, this wasn't one of the memories that rerouted him during his hypnotherapy. Instead, he met his 16-year-old self on a Newmarket street surrounded by a gang of teenagers wielding snooker cues. They made me count down from 10 in French, Lampert says. On 0, he knew he was in for it. What was significant in hypnotherapy was not the snooker cues, the boys or the countdown, but the adults walking past. None of them doing anything. At the last second, someone stepped in, but for Lampert, the memory encapsulates the complete abandonment of the adult world during his youth. When he was 15, his second key memory, his parents separated. By then, he'd finally made friends and didn't want to return to France with his mum. His dad was working away, so I decided to stay, thinking my parents would help, but they didn't. It was like, oh, bye then. I ended up living out of a bag. I stayed with friends' families. Yeah, I stayed with many families. Like living in Newmarket now, I bump into so many people and I'm like, oh, can you thank your mum and dad for letting me stay, at theirs when I was young? Oh, and there you are. Oh yeah, I stayed with you as well, didn't I? I stayed with a bunch of people, which is kind of cool. It was only when he got to university in London to study theatre arts that other students asked him where he lived and suggested a word for his situation. I was like, oh, was that homelessness? That was a huge shock because for me it was a constant, right, to be living from one place to another. At university he tried stand-up. He wanted to be an actor and this route had led him... route? And this route had led Robin Williams, Jim Carrey and Eddie Murphy to Hollywood. But even Lampert's work made him feel like an outsider, picked upon. And this was the third memory. In 2009, when he was 21, he made a TV commercial for the Viva TV channel, which was launching in the UK. From the ad's slogan, he immediately became known as the Up Your Viva guy. There were lots of close-ups of Lampert leaning into camera. Granted, he says, it was a very annoying advert. But he was unprepared for the vitriol that followed, including death threats and Facebook groups dedicated to how ugly I was. With comments like, he's so ugly, eek. That guy looks like a dog. I mean, these are the ones that she's allowed to post in The Guardian. Some of them were really harsh. These are quite funny. Paralysed horse going through an electric fence. I think that was one of my friends that actually called me that. I never felt attractive, Lampert says. When I smile, I've got big old gums, right? I was, a little gangly. Being a comedian, of course, he joked about it. He took 2 tickets to the Gum Show to Edinburgh Fringe in 2013. I used it as comedy, not realising that I was pushing all the pain down. When he met Jordan, I didn't believe she found me attractive. There were a lot of insecurities. He cried heavily after one particular hypnotherapy session. I went, when's the last time I actually looked in the mirror? And I realised I used to brush my teeth looking down. In this state of hypersensitivity to himself, his past and his pain, he became a sort of memory gremlin, he says. I don't need that memory. I don't need this memory. I don't need that one. He mimes plucking them out of his hand and discarding them. Lampert was already having a memory clear out before the amnesia kicked in. He thought hypnotherapy was healing him. Instead, he believes now it triggered amnesia. The brain was like, oh, I am done with this stress. Shh, reset. After his neighbour took him to hospital, he escaped. When the authorities found him, he was 5150'd, or sectioned, strapped to a stretcher and taken to a more secure location. He's not sure how long he spent there. I think it was around 5 days. It wasn't too bad, but, what is time is my point. But he remembers raising his hand during a circle discussion to say, people forget that we can grieve the death of ourselves. A fellow patient was suitably reassured, he says. I was in the hospital as the crazy guy, and I helped a fellow crazy. Lampert's experience of psychosis intensified with COVID-19. In 2018, before the amnesia, he'd written a script he hoped to sell about a global outbreak of disease. When the pandemic happened, I thought I wrote the pandemic. I mean, I really lost it, he says. And that changes a person, because I thought I was to blame for millions of deaths. People are confused, scared and amazed when Lampert tells them what he's been through. He tried Jungian therapy, an NHS course for people with PTSD, antidepressants and mood stabilizers. He read widely and quotes from Shakespeare's Coriolanus and the philosopher Cornel West. He kept auditioning for roles and in 2023 landed the part of Crow, the body, not the voice, alongside Benedict Cumberbatch in The Thing with Feathers. And that paycheck finally got me a place by myself. I paid it up front. A year in an apartment in Wembley, he says. So how is he feeling now? Well, there's a part of me that wants to forget and move on and be back to, normal, whatever that means. And then there's a part of me that's like, don't you dare forget. Insight into his own traumatic memories has given him a better understanding of himself and of others. He's lived with his dad in Newmarket for the past 18 months, the first time since childhood. We talk a lot more comfortably, he says. I understand us in a different way. He told his dad he felt abandoned. He said, well, Nan left the house when I was 7, and I didn't know that. He says he's on great terms with his mum. As for the voices in his head, now, Lampert says, there is only shh, white noise, just silence. It's actually really quite nice. I can't help wondering if life for Lampert is better now, with his new, rearranged relationship with the universe, or whether it was better before the amnesia. I don't know, he says. I'm lonely. And at the same time, I feel connected to something much larger than myself. Technically, life is much better, but I feel very alien. Relationships might be easier if he hadn't been through what he's been through, he says. I look at people in pubs laughing, and I'm like, oh, I don't have that. When he finally came back to himself, 18 months after the amnesia, he did it by making himself laugh. Reflecting on the pandemic, his perceived role in it, and the burden I was carrying, he whispered to himself, a death is sad, a dozen a tragedy, but millions. I mean, that's an achievement. It wasn't a joke for anyone else in the world. A ridiculous thing to say, and honestly, I hadn't laughed in such a long time. He laughed so hard, tears streaming down his face, and I held on to myself and I went, there you are. He puts his hand on his heart. What I am, the essence maybe, is just laughter, good humour. When the pain becomes a joke, he says, it is soothing. I think she did a great job cramming, a lot of my life into 2 pages. There's something kind of almost extraordinary and mind-boggling and weird to have so much of my life just printed into 2 pages like that. And obviously some sentences could be by themselves 2 more pages, right? Like the very brief paragraph that she gave on my renewed relationship with my parents, for example. We could go into deeper, there's loads of different things that we could go in deeper, but I'm very grateful for her taking the time to write something. And if you want to read it, I'll post a link of the article in the comment section. if you want to, like, you know, take your time reading it. Yeah, all right, I'm going to take a little pause now. That was almost that was almost quite heavy to do, to sort of read all that. And that is my point. That is why a part of me wants to change my story. And by change, I don't mean alter the past. I mean reframe how I feel about the past. Like, that thing really did happen to me. But it also happened, like, you know, 7 years ago. And those things that happened to me as a child, that happened to me 20 plus years ago. And although, yes, they have a part to play in the present moment that I am, the person that I am, but at the same time, it's like when people speak about a dream they had. Now, some people don't even like when others speak about their dreams. I quite like it because it reveals things about themselves. It reveals, you know, parts of the psyche, parts of the brain that is trying to communicate with them. But if someone spoke about a dream that they had 2 years ago, it's like, yeah, well, bruv, I mean, change the track. And that's what it feels like with me, is this story needs to be put to bed. It needs a little rest. It's so far away now that all those things that happened to me do feel like a dream. And in a way, that's what life is. That's what every memory you ever have is, the distant wake of a dream. Like tears in the rain, as Roy would say in Blade Runner. Okay, so we're going to go through a bunch of my notebooks, and I'm going to keep what is necessary, and then essentially I think I'm going to have a little bit of a sacrifice later. I'm going to burn them away as a physical representation of letting go, but also just, you know, it's always nice to make room in your space. You make room for the new, right? That's what they say. This, by the way, is the chapter titles of 0-1 of my one-man show, and it kind of shows in a way where I'm at, right? So we open with trapped in superposition. It's the idea that that's how it felt when I emerged out of my amnesia. I felt like I was in superposition, which is a term in quantum mechanics to let us know when a state is in multiple states at once, right? So it's the idea that it's all these possible things at once at the same time, and then the act of observation sort of transforms it into a thing. And so that's what emerging out of amnesia was like. It was as if I was in a place where I could become all the different possible variations of humanity. It's like with a blank slate, I was aware that I could become any possible human. And so I was in, you know, superposition. Is that what superposition looks like? Whoa, 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 whoa! And so that's what the show sort of starts like. It's the idea that I was all these possible things, and it's my way of trying to return to decoherence. And decoherence is when a quantum state loses its superposition. Right, so in a way I'm saying ignore that, because that's for the show. We're going to go through my notebooks. That's a lot, so I'm obviously going to edit a lot of that out. But I want to show. There are some things that I want to show you. So, for example, my grandma passed away this year. She lived a pretty cool life. The last few years were quite challenging for her. It was just one cancer after the other. So really, really challenging for her. But hopefully she's in like a better place up there, right? But then what is up and what is down? Anyway, that's don't get distracted. Okay, so in her attic there were my old school reports, and what I like about not just school reports but like some notebooks is that this one is in Flemish, which is a variant of Dutch. And then we've got the one in French. And then we have the one in English. And that's just my childhood. So that's just a little example of how I was all over the place as a child. And being all over the place was my constant. That was what I knew. And therefore I lived as a body in constant movement. So being nomadic in a way was my home. But what I'm trying to do is actually have a home. It'd be nice to just be still for a bloody moment, please. You know, the amount of times I had to get rid of stuff. I've mentioned this before in a video that I did about 1.5 years ago. I think the video is called Roots in the Wind, but that says it all, right? My roots are in the wind, which is a paradox, right? Because how do roots grow a thing if they're constantly being blown away? It doesn't even say what year it is, but I think I was around 10, something like that. So, bloody hell, it's 29 years ago. And one of the notes, it says, "Tu vas trop vite. Tu vas trop vite." You're going too fast. And that has been something that everyone has said to me throughout my life. I think someone told me that last week. One of the reasons I don't improve in chess is because when I play, instead of calculating and looking at the board and really taking my time to look at all the positions, I go, move! Yeah, I've constantly been on the go, and life has been quite fast. And I love that that's one of the notes. Tu vas trop vite. You're going too fast. Eric has worked well in sculpture lessons, and the figure he made was adequately modelled. Apart from the huge head, there is a correspondence between it and human anatomy. Was the huge head a sort of metaphor for what was to come? The marks he has received this year reflect the effort he has put into 2- and 3-dimensional projects. Yeah, but what about the 4th-dimensional project, baby? It's funny reading some of these journals from the last few years. It feels a little bit like when Marty reads the letter from Doc in Back to the Future 2. You know, at the end when the DeLorean gets struck by a thunderbolt and it disappears, and Marty thinks that Doc is dead, but no, it turns out he's trapped in 1885, and he writes Marty a letter, and who has it? Western Union or FedEx? One of the postal services has the letter for, you know, almost 100 years, and they deliver it. "Are you Marty McFly? We have a letter for you." And it's and then he discovers that Doc is alive, but he's alive in 1885. And I'm reading this, and I remember writing it. I was writing this in the Sahara Desert for this particular journal. And there is a part of me that just does not want to get rid of them, because I sometimes wonder what it would be like to read those when I'm 60, when I'm 80, to have this cacophony of journals in some room somewhere. There's something kind of cool about that. But then a part of me also wonders if they weigh me down. And then I wonder if simply having video evidence of this journal and then me filming it and then keeping that safe somewhere, you know, in the ether of the internet. I mean, will it ever be safe? What if a solar flare suddenly takes out all our technology? Is any of our memories safe? And must it stay safe? That's another thing. Like, are we meant to forget? I don't know, strange. I gave shortbread to a man with no teeth. He was hungry, and here I was with a whole unopened pack, a gift. I asked him in Arabic if he could speak English or French. Tatakalamu al-Inglisi wa al-Furansi? I think that's right. And he replied, opening his mouth wide to see the mistake that I had made. And now it's too late to ask for them back. So I doubled down and told him that he'd like them. From Scotland, I said, another world to him. He can suck on them, I thought, until they're paste. I walked away, satisfied with my philanthropy. Yeah, I was so annoyed. I didn't have any cash to give him, and I thought, oh, I'm going to do something good. I gave him shortbread, which I love. And then he smiled and he had no fucking teeth. Gutted. Here's an interesting quote by Aldous Huxley in his book, The Doors of Perception. My actual experience was still of an indefinite duration, or alternatively, of a perpetual present made up of one continually changing apocalypse. Fitting for what I'm currently doing. A perpetual present made up of one continually changing apocalypse. I don't want to carry this for the rest of my life, because even just this little pile is quite heavy. But I also, I don't want to forget it. I want a record of it somewhere. And I don't know if, I don't know if one will ever be able to do that in the infinite, which is maybe why we need just one thing to maybe remember a whole catalogue of memories. You know, I could say that's why maybe some people have scars. They have a scar for a particular moment in time that captures almost the essence of an entire story, even if the details fade. It's why in the Odyssey, I've actually yet to read the poem, but I went to see the movie yesterday by Christopher Nolan, and Odysseus at one moment has been on such a long journey, he's forgotten where he's from, he's forgotten where home is, and not fully due to his fault. He's been eating a lotus flower that someone has given him, Calypso. Is Calypso a goddess, or who knows? I'm not well versed with that story, but he's forgotten. He's forgotten about his wife. He's forgotten about his son. And at one moment, he's reconnecting with this item that his wife gave him so that he can remember to come home, as if the item itself is a compass to return to her. And potentially, I have my scars. I have that which I can at least carry wherever I go. Or maybe there is a totem within that will always now be here. It's hard to say. I start dipping my fingers in the molten candle wax and then caressing the flame. Foreplay with my own brain. I'm in a peep show watching my mind and body trying to fuck each other in public. It's at this point I realise I'm in trouble. This is the best day I've ever had.